Joining me now to make sense of all of this is the Director of Programs, Corporate Accountability and Public Participation Africa, CAPA, Philip Jakbo. Philip, good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning.
You're welcome.
It's always a pleasure.
Exactly.
Yes.
Now, the point there is, on a day like this, we're talking about UNEP at 50. UNEP gave a report of the environmental situation in Nigeria several years ago, and it brought a lot of hope that would bring a shift from what it used to be. And when it comes to the cleaning of the Niger Delta and part of it from all of the years of devastation and pollution and all of that, but up until now, we're still here, still hoping on hope. Now, talk to us basically from the perspective of Nigeria's commitment. You heard the president, at the Paris agreement, there were commitments from Nigeria. What are you seeing? What steps are we taking towards that commitment, if you can see any?
Well, I think starting with the UNEP report, which was in 2011, that was a study conducted by that organization. The Nigerian government commissioned the UNEP to do that report in 2006 during Chief Olusegun Obasanjo's tenure, and the report was finally submitted in August 2011 to the Dr. Goodluck Jonathan administration. Unfortunately, nothing concrete, nothing we can lay our fingers on happened between 2011 and 2016. I think from 2016 was when the current vice president visited, I think, Rivers State, and then there was a flag off for the cleanup. Now, to give a little bit of context, we must understand what the UNEP found. First of all, the UNEP collected samples, hydrocarbon pollution from 4,000 sites, collected 4,000 samples from 200 sites.
Okay.
And 65 of those sites were deemed, I don't know what word to use. The level of pollution was mammoth. And even if the cleanup proper starts, according to the UNEP at that point, it will take 30 years. So, of course, the Ogoni land is the epicenter of pollution globally. From 2016, on a good note, the government's body language, seemed to point to doing something. But there's been so much bureaucracy. I think out of the 65 sites, only about 18 or so have been cleaned up. There was bidding sometime early last month for 31 other sites. So these things are not going on simultaneously. So in the course of this, the people's lives have been disrupted. I've been to Ogoniland several times. I always say that when you're in one of those communities and the pungent, smell of hydrocarbon in the atmosphere, you feel if you light a match,
exactly. Everyone can
it can be ignited.
Yeah.
But there's bidding for 31 other sites to be cleaned up. So the process has been very, very slow. There were some emergency measures that the government was supposed to put in place, and I think the hydrocarbon pollution restoration project is now doing something, but it's very, very slow. It's bogged down by bureaucracy. So that shows, to a large extent, you might say, okay, the previous administration didn't do anything, but yes, this administration is doing something, but it's too slow. And that again also shows us how we look at the environment and how we look at climate change, because of course these things are interlinked. What happened in Ogoniland is a result of fossil fuel extraction. And fossil fuel extraction is still ongoing. That's what is causing, climate change as we know today. But Nigeria is not doing enough to wean itself of this fossil fuels addiction. We are still exploring oil in the north. There's still oil extraction going on in the Niger Delta. In fact, the oil corporations that are guilty for some of these infractions we have been talking about are even moving offshore, where their operations will largely not be able to be monitored. So you are going to have more incidents, for instance, of dead fish littering the shorelines of the Niger Delta. Nobody's asking why these things are happening. You are still going to have, because we have been told that one of the causes of climate change is this, if not the major cause of climate change, is the fossil fuel industry. So the more you extract, the more you are going to have the diminishing coastlines you have in Lagos up to Ondo and beyond. Ayetoro, a community in Ondo State, is disappearing. It's practically underwater. It's also affecting the northern part of the country because you also have massive desertification, coming down. Yeah. And because of that,
it's encroaching gradually.
It's coming down. Lake Chad, for instance, Lake Chad was about 25,000 square kilometers as at 1965 or so. It's like 1,500 square kilometers now and still, shrinking. So people continue to migrate. So you can see the impact is from one to the other. People continue to migrate. The crisis you have in the middle belt today, fighting over the little available cover, green cover, is largely because people have to migrate. The millions that depended on the Lake Chad are moving, to the middle belt. In the southern part of the country, we're also facing coastal erosion. So it's almost like everybody is going to meet in the middle belt, we'll slug it out, sadly. So this is the reality. So Nigeria, I can't say Nigeria has done too much in terms of mitigating the impacts of climate change or doing very, very much. It's not commendable at all.
Okay. Now, when we talk about this, measures to cut down greenhouse gas, Nigeria has stated its commitment over and over again. However, there are arguments that you were talking about cutting down on some of those things, and we're talking about, activating economic activity for development, and all of that, especially when you're looking at the demand for your population and all of that. How do we balance all of those? In the 21st century, when we talk about those actual measures, what are those measures? What would they be, really?
Well, I think our nationally determined contributions, which is what every country has to do to cut down on greenhouse gas emission, includes, for instance, introducing climate smart agriculture, not what we have today, where you have massive degradation of the soil and the environment. It's about adopting mass transit. So the trains, we have trains that will take thousands of people rather than everybody putting their cars on the road. Things like that, which will cut down ideally on emissions. But balancing that with the economics. Now, the question that most people will ask is, okay, if we wean ourselves of fossil fuel extraction, how do we sustain our economy? But I think the greater question will be that we've been extracting since 1958. Has it really been of benefit to us as a people? We were better off when we depended on agriculture. Go to the Niger Delta. The oil has been the cost. There's practically nothing that people can point to say, oh, because of the oil, this is what we got. It has only cost division, strife, divide and rule, and the profits are made by the corporations, and they take these profits out of the country. So you have some few elite who benefit from this thing. It's just like the fuel we're talking about today. Nigeria produces oil, but we also import refined products. And today, as it is, the price of oil in the international market is, I think, it's nearly up to $125 or so dollars per barrel. This is when the oil producing companies are really making money. But we are not making money because our raw product, we export it. Yes, we make that money, and then we use that money to buy refined products. So it's just a paradox. So that's why we believe by the time we transit to renewables, that safe renewables. By the way, Nigeria is also talking about exploiting nuclear potentials, which, with what happened in Ukraine just some few days ago, when Russia attacked the largest nuclear plant, and God saved the world practically, because had it been there was a radiation leak, most parts of Europe today, I think most people will be seeking visas to run down to Africa. So it shows that this is not the way to go. The way to go is to adopt those clean, safe alternatives that even can be managed at community level. So that is the way to go. So oil has not really benefited us in truth.
If you see UNEP, we're celebrating or commemorating 50 years of UNEP, what they're doing worldwide. Now, UNEP is the United Nations. Of course, when it comes to the domestics of every country, they cannot come and impose any of their programs or projects on you. But what influence? Because if UNEP understands these things, know that, okay, the climate change, the impact of pollution and all of that is taking this kind of a toll on the people and the environment and the economy and the politics and all of that. What influence does UNEP have to, ensure that government, shift the ground towards doing something, especially when they have the report?
Well, I think first things first is that UNEP as a body, it was founded in 1972. The good thing is that it is domiciled, that's the headquarters is in Nairobi, which is in Africa. So that is also a plus for us, because I think that's the first UN organization that is decided to, site its headquarters here in Africa. And some of the things the UNEP looks at is issues of deforestation, biodiversity loss, and of late, climate change. In fact, there are three core areas of focus are nature action, pollution, issues of pollution, and then of recent climate change. What they can only do is to advise. Okay. They can only provide you research and statistics. And you recall when the issue of Ogoni pollution started, there was a need for a recognized body to do that investigation. So the Nigerian government reached out to the UNEP in 2006, and that's when that work started, which they completed in 2011. It was a good job. You can't fault it. So the UNEP cannot do more than that, because it's actually even funded by member countries. And I think today there are about 193 member countries, including Nigeria, majorly funded by the US, of course. But the UNEP cannot do beyond those kind of things. They can only advise. They have their own template. Beyond that, the responsibility lies on governments to do what they need to do. Like in the case of the UNEP report, assessment of Ogoniland, it was the Nigerian government that went to the UNEP, needed their expertise, and they provided it. So this is kind of things they do across the globe, but mostly in Africa and Asia. Yeah.
All right. Now let's talk about the role of traditional rulers in all of these, especially in the Niger Delta. We know the level of influence that traditional rulers wield on being the bridge between government on one hand and then the people on the other hand. We've had a lot of reports and accusations. Some traditional rulers are not, representing our interests. We've heard of other reports that said, if not for our traditional ruler, we would have gotten this, here and there. But ultimately, we all know that our traditional rulers wield a lot of influence in our communities and where we find ourselves. How do we begin to maximize that influence and turn it into what will put pressure on government on one hand to ensure that this cleanup that is very slow on one hand and non-existent in some other places can pick up? Because this is not just about people in the Niger Delta. It's about Nigeria. Yeah. It's about Africa. It's about the people.
Yeah. Well, like you've rightly said, the traditional institution plays a very, very crucial role. And of course, we know that institution to a large extent has been bastardized by our politicians. But still, they wield that influence. So in government policies, for instance, in driving its policy on climate change and in gauging the perspectives from the people, feedback from the people, the traditional rulers are very, very vital. So I will recommend, for instance, in the government's climate change campaign, which should involve everybody, the traditional rulers can play very, very crucial roles. The National Orientation Agency can even work with them to reach the local people to understand what is happening. Because sometimes when people start seeing changes in their environment, they think there are some spirits somewhere doing some things. But the traditional institution can then come in, play that very crucial role of educating the people at that level. The people who trust the traditional rulers at that level. And then through the traditional rulers, government can also get feedback on what people are passing through, and that will inform policy actions.
All right. There seems to be some level of disconnect between what the companies are doing in the Niger Delta and those who are in the community. Sometimes you hear when there is an oil spill, for instance, we've had a long disagreement as to who was responsible or how it happened. Well, the point there is that people live just close by as to where the oil is being explored in some cases, where we should all know what happened. But there's always the accusation and counter-accusation. No, it was sabotage. No, it was carelessness from the company, back and forth. But it tells to a great extent that there's a disconnect where there's no synergy between the companies and host communities. Host communities are the ones who would originally have, kept an eye
protect
them, kept an eye on them, and then, because anything that happens negatively, they are the first to feel the impact. And if benefits come, they are also the first. Ideally. Good, ideally. But the point there is, this gap is very loud and very wide. How do we bridge this gap and communities to take objective responsibility for companies, protect them, support them, and then work with them to deliver the best?
Well, first things first, I think the policy of disconnect, like you rightly mentioned, sometimes is deliberate on the part of those corporations.
Why is that?
As we have known over time, we've worked in the Niger Delta, we've worked with community people. The companies thrive in divide and rule. Starting from even far beyond, before that, the era of Kensaruiwa, and people even after that, we saw the role of the corporation involved in dividing the Ogoni people, and we saw what that led to. So the companies, the fact that there's strife in the communities, the fact that the community people don't know what is happening, the fact that the community people are not even employed to work in those corporations, is a deliberate thing to keep the profits flowing and keep the people pauperized. It has always been. Go across the entire Niger Delta, that's what's happening. So even when you have some form of relationship between the corporations and the community people, there's always something they do to disrupt it finally. Now, when there's an oil spill, ideally there should be what they call a joint investigative visit. So it involves the oil corporation involved, the community people, and then the monetary agencies like NOSRA and the rest of them. But in what we have documented time and again, the companies are so quick to jump to the conclusion that once there's an oil spill, there's a breakage somewhere, it's sabotage, pushing the responsibility. That's what they do first. It has always been the case. There was the ITO spill in Lembe, Bayelsa. For like 1 month, this thing was happening. And at the end of the day, they blame the community people. Even when the corporations are known to be, at fault, have we seen the appropriate sanctions meted on them? So that's why we always believe that it's because the government is in bed with these corporations. That's why you cannot hold them accountable. There was the Trinity Spirit explosion just, I think, last month. Now, is investigation going on? Nobody is hearing anything anymore. So that was a facility that was supposed to have been decommissioned because it was built in 1976 and it exploded and killed what we hear, maybe about 10 people, and nobody knows today how much oil was spilled into the environment. The same thing with what happened with the Nembe spill and many others. Today, as we speak, beyond Rivers State, the most polluted state in this country, where the oil spills are happening almost every day, is in Bayelsa State. And what is happening? It's the same thing, sabotage. The people are blamed. The corporations refuse to take responsibility. But when it happens outside this country, look at the incident, the BP spill in the Gulf of Mexico. The president jumped in, and BP had to pay fines to the tune of about $25 billion. That is real. That is the people. There was no back and forth endlessly. The community people didn't need to take them to court in another part of the world. Here, we've had cases where community people have had to go to other crimes, take these corporations to court in The Hague or in the UK before justice came. Because here, the courts, it's back and forth. This case is going for years and nothing comes out of it. The people are left pauperized, their livelihoods taken away from them, and the companies keep on making money. So it is a deliberate policy, but our government needs to wake up, take responsibility. It is our people, it is our environment, it is our climate. Yeah. So if we don't do something about it, it might be happening to the people today, but it's going to affect all of us. That's the reality.
In fact, we're all affected already. The difference will be that some people are affected indirectly, while others are directly. But one way or the other, everyone is feeling the impact of this. Philip Japwell, thank you so much for coming on the program today.
It's always a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you.